They say your wedding day is supposed to be the happiest day of your life. What they don't tell you is that it can also be the day your entire world burns to ash while you stand there in white silk watching everything you believed in crumble. My name is Harper Thorne, and this is the story of how I discovered that the two people I trusted most had been lying to my face for months. But more than that, this is the story of how I found something unexpected in the ruins of what was supposed to be my happily ever after myself. 3 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I was 26 working as a kindergarten teacher in our small town of Millbrook. Every morning I'd wake up in the cozy apartment I shared with my fiancé, Wesley, and feel this warm bubble of contentment in my chest. We'd been together for 4 years, engaged for one, and our wedding was set for June 15th, a perfect summer day for a perfect summer wedding. Wesley Reed worked at his father's construction company. He was tall, with broad shoulders, sandy brown hair, and those piercing hazel eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Everyone said we looked perfect together, the golden couple. "You're so lucky, Harper," the mothers of my students would tell me at pickup time. "Wesley is such a catch. And that ring," they gestured to the modest but beautiful diamond on my finger, the one Wesley had saved for 8 months to buy. I believed them. I believed in us. My maid of honor was Zara Collins, my best friend since we were 7 years old. She had long black hair that always looked perfect, even when she claimed she just rolled out of bed. Her laugh could fill a room, and men turned their heads when she walked by. But she was my person, the one who held my hair when I was sick, who stayed up all night helping me study for teaching exams, who cried harder than I did when my grandmother passed away 2 years ago. When Wesley proposed, she was the first person I called. "Oh my God, Harper," she'd screamed into the phone. "I'm so happy for you. This is going to be the most beautiful wedding ever." She threw herself into wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone planning her own celebration. She helped me pick the venue, the old Riverside Manor with its sprawling gardens and Victorian charm. She spent hours with me tasting cakes, choosing flowers, addressing invitations in her perfect handwriting because mine looked like a child's scrawl. "You deserve this happiness," she told me, squeezing my hand as we sat surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric samples. "You're the kindest person I know, Harper. Wesley is so lucky to have you." I trusted her completely. I trusted them both. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of final fittings, last-minute details, and growing excitement. My family mom, dad, and my younger brother Thayer were over the moon. Mom cried every time she looked at my dress hanging in the closet. Dad kept practicing his father of the bride speech in the mirror when he thought no one was looking. Even my grandmother's sister, Alara Rose, had flown in from Florida. At 82, she was sharp as a tack and had been married to my great-uncle for 60 years before he passed. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she could see straight into your soul. "Marriage isn't about the wedding day, sweetheart," she told me the night before, her weathered hands holding mine. "It's about every day after. It's about choosing each other when things get hard, when the butterflies fade, when real life sets in. Make sure you're marrying someone who will choose you back." I nodded, thinking I knew exactly what she meant. Wesley and I had weathered storms before. We'd gotten through his father's heart attack, my struggle to find a teaching job, the stress of saving for a house. We were solid. We were ready. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, dreaming of walking down the aisle toward my future. June 15th dawned bright and clear, with just enough breeze to keep the summer heat from being oppressive. I woke up in my childhood bedroom where I'd spent the night according to tradition. Sunlight streamed through the lace curtains Mom had hung when I was 12, and for a moment, I felt like a little girl again, safe and loved and full of dreams. Then I remembered today was my wedding day. The house was already buzzing with activity. I could hear Mom in the kitchen, probably stressed cooking enough food to feed an army. Dad was on the phone with someone, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when trying to solve a problem. Thayer was in the shower, singing off-key like he always did. I stretched, feeling surprisingly calm. All the planning was done. all the decisions made. Today, all I had to do was show up and marry the man I loved. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Wesley. Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you at the altar. Love you. I smiled, typing back, love you too. See you soon. Husband. Another buzz. This one from Zara wedding day. I'm so excited I barely slept. Getting my hair done now. Then I'll be over to help you get ready. This is going to be perfect. The morning flew by in a whirlwind of hair curlers, makeup brushes, and nervous laughter. The photographer arrived at 10 RG, capturing every moment as my bridesmaids Zara, my cousin Emma, and Wesley's sister Kira helped me transform from Sleepy Harper into a bride. My dress was everything I dreamed of, simple but elegant, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that made me feel like a princess. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. Oh, honey, Mom whispered, tears already starting. You look absolutely radiant. Alara Rose sat in the corner, watching everything with those sharp eyes of hers. When our gazes met in the mirror, she smiled, but something in her expression made me pause. It was gone so quickly I thought I'd imagined it. By noon, we were loading into cars to head to Riverside Manor. The ceremony was set for 2 p.m. with photos starting at 1 p.m. Everything was running perfectly on schedule. The venue looked like something out of a fairy tale. White roses and baby's breath adorned every surface. The chairs were arranged in perfect rows facing the gazebo where Wesley and I would exchange vows. The reception tent was already set up in the garden with round tables covered in crisp white linens and centerpieces that had taken Zara and me 3 hours to arrange the night before. It's perfect, I breathed, taking it all in. You're perfect, Zara said, squeezing my arm. Wesley is going to lose his mind when he sees you. We had an hour before the ceremony, so I settled into the bridal suite to touch up my makeup and calm my nerves. The photographer was capturing the groomsmen getting ready in a separate building, and I found myself wondering what Wesley was doing right now. Was he nervous, excited? Did he feel the same sense of rightness that I did? Like everything in our lives had led to this moment. At 1:30, Zara excused herself to check on the flowers and make sure the musicians were set up. I'll be right back, she promised. Don't you dare mess up that lipstick while I'm gone. At 1:45, my phone rang. It was my wedding coordinator, Linda. Harper, honey, we have a tiny situation, she said, her voice carefully controlled. The groom seems to be running a few minutes late. Nothing to worry about. Just wanted to give you a heads up. A flutter of anxiety stirred in my stomach. Late Wesley is never late. Did something happen? I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe traffic or last-minute jitters. Men sometimes need a few extra minutes to collect themselves. We'll just push the start time back 15 minutes. I hung up, trying to shake off the worry. Wesley was probably just nervous. This was normal. Weddings never started exactly on time anyway. At 2 hours, Linda called again. Harper, we're going to need to delay just a bit longer. The groom still hasn't arrived, and we can't seem to reach him on his phone. Now the flutter had become a full-blown knot. What do you mean you can't reach him? Where's his best man? Where's his father? They're here, and they're trying to locate him. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. I tried calling Wesley myself. Straight to voicemail. I tried texting. No response. Where's Zara? I asked Emma, who was hovering nearby, looking concerned. She went to check on things 20 minutes ago. Emma's face went pale. I haven't seen her since she left. The knot in my stomach tightened. I tried calling Zara. Straight to voicemail. By 2:15, the guests were getting restless. I could hear the murmur of confused voices drifting in from the ceremony space. My parents appeared in the doorway, their faces tight with worry and barely contained anger. Sweetheart, Dad said carefully, we're going to figure this out. There has to be an explanation. But I was already moving, my mind racing. Wesley and Zara both missing, both not answering their phones. On my wedding day. The hotel, I said suddenly. Wesley got a room at the hotel last night. The tradition thing, not seeing the bride before the wedding. Mom grabbed my arm. Harper, maybe we should wait. No. The word came out sharper than I intended. I need to know where my fiancé is. I need to know why he's not here. The Millbrook Inn was a 5-minute drive from the venue. I gathered up my skirts and marched toward the car, my family trailing behind me like worried ducklings. Elara Rose appeared at my elbow, moving surprisingly quickly for her age. I'm coming with you, she said firmly. Aunt Elara, you don't need to. Child, I've been around long enough to recognize when something's not right. You shouldn't face this alone. The drive felt like hours, though it couldn't have been more than a few minutes. My hands were shaking as I smoothed my dress, trying to prepare myself for whatever I was about to find. Maybe Wesley was sick. Maybe there had been an emergency. Maybe his phone had died and he'd lost track of time. Maybe. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, I already knew. The Millbrook Inn was a charming bed and breakfast that had been in town for over a century. Wesley had booked the honeymoon suite for the night before the wedding, joking that he wanted to get used to luxury before our actual honeymoon in the Bahamas. I thought it was sweet, romantic, even. Now, as I stood in the lobby in my wedding dress, the elderly desk clerk looking at me with a mixture of confusion and pity, it felt like a cruel joke. Room 237, she said softly, handing me the spare key I'd requested. The elevator is just around the corner. My family clustered around me as we rode up to the second floor. Thayer kept checking his phone, probably hoping for some miracle text that would explain everything. Mom was crying quietly, and Dad's jaw was set in that way that meant he was furious but trying to hold it together for my sake. Elara Rose stood beside me, her small hand resting on my arm. She didn't say anything, but her presence was oddly comforting. The hallway stretched out before us, carpeted in deep burgundy, with brass sconces casting warm light on the walls. Room 237 was at the end the honeymoon suite with its heavy wooden door and brass nameplate. I stood there for a moment, key in hand, listening. The hotel was quiet, but I could hear something from inside the room. Soft sounds, movement. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure everyone could hear it. Harper, Mom whispered. Maybe we should knock first. But I was already sliding the key into the lock, already turning the handle, already pushing the door open. The room was dim, heavy curtains blocking most of the afternoon sunlight. It took my eyes a moment to adjust, to make sense of what I was seeing. The bed was a mess of tangled sheets and scattered clothes. A man's suit, Wesley's suit, the one he was supposed to wear to marry me, lay crumpled on the floor next to a bridesmaid's dress. A purple bridesmaid's dress, Zara's dress, and there in the bed were Wesley and Zara. They were asleep or passed out, naked and intertwined like lovers who had spent the night together. Zara's long black hair was spread across Wesley's chest. His arm was wrapped around her waist, holding her close even in sleep. The sight hit me like a physical blow. All the air left my lungs. The room spun. For a moment, I thought I might actually faint. Behind me, I heard Mom gasp. Dad cursed under his breath. Thayer made a sound like he'd been punched. But I didn't move. I couldn't move. I just stood there, taking in every horrible detail. The empty champagne bottle on the nightstand, Zara's jewelry scattered on the dresser. The way they looked so comfortable together, so natural. Like this wasn't the first time. How long? The question echoed in my mind. How long had this been going on? How long had they been lying to me, betraying me, making a fool of me, Harper? Elara Rose said quietly, "Come here." But I couldn't. I was frozen, staring at the ruins of my life, trying to understand how I'd gotten here. This morning, I'd been a bride. I'd been happy. I'd been loved. Now I was nothing. A sound escaped my throat. Half sob, half laugh. The bitter irony of it all was almost funny. Almost. Wesley stirred in the bed, probably sensing the light from the open door. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. It took him a moment to realize where he was, what was happening. When he saw me standing there in my wedding dress, his face went white. "Harper," he breathed, scrambling to sit up, accidentally waking Zara in the process. "Harper, I can explain." "Well, explain." The word came out as a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. "Explain what exactly?" "Explain why you're in bed with my best friend on our wedding day. Explain why 100 people are sitting in a garden waiting for a groom who's too busy screwing my maid of honor to show up." Zara was awake now, her eyes wide with horror as she realized what was happening. She grabbed for the sheet, trying to cover herself, but it was too late. We'd all seen everything. "Harper, please," she started, her voice shaking. "It's not what it looks like. It's not what it looks like." I laughed, and the sound was sharp and broken. "It looks like my fiancé and my best friend just betrayed me. It looks like the two people I trusted most in the world have been lying to my face, so please, Zara, tell me what it actually is." Neither of them had an answer for that. I turned around slowly, looking at my family. Mom was crying openly now. Dad looked like he wanted to commit murder. Thayer was staring at Wesley with pure disgust, and Alara Rose. Alara Rose was watching me with those sharp eyes, waiting to see what I would do next. "Call them," I said. "Call them," I said quietly. "What?" Mom asked. "Call them. Call Wesley's parents. Call his sister. Call his best man. Call everyone who's waiting for this wedding to happen." My voice was getting stronger, steadier. "Tell them to come up here. Tell them they need to see something." "Harper," Wesley said, finally finding his voice. He was scrambling for his clothes, panic written all over his face. "Please, let's talk about this privately. Let's, privately." I turned back to him, and I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest. "You want to talk about this privately after you humiliated me in front of our entire town, after you made me stand in the bridal room waiting for a groom who was never coming." I pulled out my phone and started making calls, myself. "Mrs. Reed. It's Harper. I need you and Mr. Reed to come up to room 237 at the Millbrook Inn right now." "Yes, I know the wedding is supposed to start. Just come and bring Kira and Jack with you." Wesley's mother answered on the second ring. "Harper, dear, where is Wesley? Everyone's asking. Room 237 Millbrook Inn. Come now. Bring everyone." I made 4 more calls. Wesley's father, his best man, the wedding coordinator, my own extended family who were still at the venue. "What are you doing?" Zara whispered, clutching the sheet to her chest. I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who had been my sister in everything but blood, who had held my secrets, shared my dreams, helped me plan the very wedding she was now destroying. "I'm making sure everyone sees exactly who you really are," I said, my voice steady as steel. "Both of you." The next 20 minutes felt like an eternity. Wesley and Zara scrambled to get dressed, whispering frantically to each other, trying to come up with some explanation that would make this okay. But there was no explanation. There was no making this okay. I sat in the chair by the window, still in my wedding dress, watching them panic. My family hovered nearby, not sure what to do or say. Alara Rose had claimed the other chair and was observing everything with the calm attention of someone watching a play unfold. "Harper, please," Wesley kept saying. "Let me explain. It just—" Zara came to pick up something, and I'd had a few drinks before the wedding. "We were talking about old times and things got out of hand. It doesn't mean anything." "It doesn't mean anything," I repeated. "You slept with my maid of honor on our wedding day, and it doesn't mean anything." "It was a mistake," Zara added, her voice small and desperate. "A terrible mistake. Harper, you have to believe me. I never meant for this to happen." "But it did happen," I said simply, "and now everyone's going to know about it." The first knock came at 2:45. Wesley's parents, his sister Kira, and his best man Jack crowded into the doorway, their faces shifting from confusion to shock to horror as they took in the scene. "What is this, Mrs. Reed whispered, her hand flying to her throat. "Wesley, what have you done?" More people arrived in waves. The wedding coordinator looking frazzled and upset. My aunts and uncles. Wesley's groomsmen. Even the photographer, who had apparently been summoned by someone and was now standing in the hallway with his camera hanging uselessly around his neck. The room filled with shocked gasps, angry voices, and the sound of Mrs. Reed crying. Wesley's father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 seconds. Kira was staring at her brother like she'd never seen him before. "How could you do this?" she whispered. "How could you do this to Harper on your wedding day?" "It was an accident," Wesley said desperately. "A stupid, drunken mistake. Harper, please, we can work through this. We can postpone the wedding, go to counseling. Work through this." The words came out louder than I intended, cutting through all the other voices in the room. Everyone fell silent, turning to look at me. I stood up slowly, smoothing down my wedding dress. In that moment, surrounded by all these people, wearing the dress I dreamed about for months, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp and deep, but underneath it was something else, something stronger, clarity. "You want to work through this," I repeated, looking directly at Wesley. "You want me to forgive you for sleeping with my best friend. You want me to pretend this never happened and marry you anyway." "Yes," he said quickly. "Yes, exactly. Harper, I love you. This doesn't change that. Zara means nothing to me. It was just stop." I held up my hand, and he fell silent. "Just stop talking." I turned to address the room, looking at each face in turn. Wesley's family, who had welcomed me as a daughter. My own family, who were watching me with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. The friends and wedding party members who had given up their Saturday to celebrate what they thought was going to be the happiest day of my life. "I want everyone to understand something," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "This isn't just about what happened this afternoon. This is about who these people really are." I walked over to the dresser where Zahra's purse sat open. Inside, I could see her phone and something else that made my blood run cold. A hotel key card. Not for this room, for a different room. "Zahra," I said, holding up the key card. "What's this?" Her face went white. I don't know what you mean." I looked at the number on the card, then at the hotel logo. "This is for the Riverside Hotel, the one across town, room 412. I turned to Wesley. "Isn't that where you stayed last month when you said you were visiting your college friend in the city?" The silence in the room was deafening. "And this one," I continued, pulling out another key card from deeper in her purse. "The Grand Hotel downtown, room 203, from 3 weeks ago, when you said you had that work conference." "Wesley." Zahra was crying now, but I wasn't done. "How long?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. "How long have you two been doing this behind my back?" Neither of them answered, but they didn't need to. The truth was written all over their faces. "Months," I said, answering my own question. "Maybe longer." While I was planning our wedding, while I was picking out flowers and tasting cakes and addressing invitations, while I was lying awake at night, excited about our future together, I turned to face the room again, and I saw my own pain reflected in the faces around me. These people loved me. They had come here to celebrate with me, and instead they were witnessing my humiliation. But I wasn't humiliated anymore. I was angry. "You want to know what the real tragedy is?" I continued, my voice getting stronger. "It's not that my fiancé cheated on me. It's not even that my best friend betrayed me. It's that they're both such cowards that they couldn't even be honest about it." I walked over to Wesley, looking up into his face. "If you loved her, if you wanted to be with her, you should have told me. You should have called off the wedding. You should have given me the chance to walk away with my dignity intact. Instead, You let me plan a wedding to a man who was already committed to someone else. You let me stand in front of a mirror this morning thinking I was the luckiest woman in the world. You let 100 people gather to witness a lie. I turned to Zara. And you helped me address the invitations to this wedding. You held my hand while I cried about how nervous I was. You told me I deserved this happiness while you were actively destroying it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said. Sorry doesn't give me back the last year of my life. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation of having my wedding day turn into a public spectacle. I looked around the room one more time, at all these faces staring at me with pity and anger and shock. And suddenly, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I want everyone to go back to the venue, I said calmly. I want you to tell the guests exactly what happened here. I want you to tell them that there will be no wedding today because the groom was too busy sleeping with the maid of honor to show up. Harper, Mrs. Reed said, her voice breaking. Please think about this. Think about your reputation, your future. My reputation, I laughed. And this time it wasn't bitter. It was almost free. Mrs. Reed, with all due respect, I'm not the one who should be worried about my reputation right now. I walked over to the window and looked out at the beautiful June day. Somewhere across town, 100 people were waiting for a bride and groom who would never appear. The flowers would wilt. The cake would go uneaten. The photographer would pack up his equipment without capturing a single moment of joy. But I was still here. I was still standing. And I was done being a victim. Actually, I said, turning back to the room, I have a better idea. We're going back to the venue. All of us. Right now. Harper, Mom said carefully. Maybe you should take some time to process this. No. I shook my head firmly. I've processed enough. Those people came here to witness a wedding. They deserve to know why there isn't going to be one. Wesley stepped forward, panic written all over his face. You can't be serious. Harper, please, think about what you're doing. This will ruin everything. Everything is already ruined, I said simply. The question is whether I'm going to let you control the narrative or if I'm going to tell the truth myself. Ilara Rose stood up from her chair, moving with surprising grace for her age. The girl's right, she said, her voice carrying the authority of 8 decades. Better to face the music than let it play without you. I looked at her gratefully. In all the chaos, she was the only one who seemed to understand what I was doing. Everyone out, I said. We're going to the venue. Wesley and Zara. You're coming too. I'm not going anywhere, Zara said, wrapping the hotel bathrobe tighter around herself. I can't face those people. You should have thought about that before you slept with my fiancé, I replied coldly. Get dressed, both of you. You created this mess, and you're going to help me clean it up. The drive back to Riverside Manor was surreal. I sat in the back of my father's car, still in my wedding dress, watching the familiar streets of Millbrook roll by. Behind us, a convoy of cars followed Wesley's family, the wedding party, even some of the guests who had been called away from the venue. My phone was buzzing constantly with texts and calls, but I ignored them all. There would be time for explanations later. Right now, I needed to focus on what I was about to do. Are you sure about this? Sweetheart, Dad asked, catching my eye in the rearview mirror. Once you do this, there's no taking it back. I'm sure, I said, and I was. For the first time in hours, maybe for the first time in months, I was completely sure about something. The venue looked exactly as we'd left it. Beautiful. Perfect. Ready for a celebration that would never come. Guests were milling around the gardens, some checking their phones, others talking in small groups. I could see the confusion on their faces, the growing concern as more and more time passed without any sign of the bride and groom. Linda, the wedding coordinator, rushed over as soon as she saw our cars pulling up. Harper, thank goodness. What's happening? Where have you been? Gather everyone, I told her. Everyone guests, vendors, staff. I want them all in the ceremony space in 5 minutes. But the wedding? There isn't going to be a wedding, I said simply. But there is going to be an announcement. Word spread quickly through the crowd. Within minutes, nearly 200 people had gathered in the ceremony space, filling the white chairs that had been arranged so carefully for a celebration. They looked confused, worried, some even annoyed at the delay. I stood at the back of the aisle looking down at all these faces, friends, family, co-workers, neighbors, people who had taken time out of their lives to be here for me, people who deserved the truth. Wesley and Zara had arrived and were standing off to the side, both looking like they wanted to disappear into the ground. Wesley's parents were with them, Mrs. Reed still crying softly. Alara Rose appeared at my elbow. "You ready for this, child?" I nodded. "I think so." "Good. Remember, the truth has a power all its own. Don't let anyone take that away from you." I walked down the aisle slowly, my wedding dress rustling with each step, the same aisle I was supposed to walk down as a bride, toward the man I loved. Instead, I was walking toward a microphone, toward the truth, toward whatever came next. When I reached the front, I turned to face the crowd. The murmur of confused voices died away, leaving only the sound of birds singing in the gardens and the distant hum of traffic. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the space. "I know you're confused about what's happening, and you deserve an explanation." I paused, looking out at all those expectant faces. In the back, I could see Wesley and Zara, both pale and terrified. "There isn't going to be a wedding today," I continued. "Not because of cold feet, not because of some last-minute emergency, but because this morning I discovered that my fiancé and my maid of honor have been having an affair." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Gasps, shocked exclamations, the sound of people turning to look at each other in disbelief. Someone in the back actually said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear. I waited for the noise to die down before continuing. "I found them together in Wesley's hotel room about an hour ago. Based on what I discovered, this has been going on for months, while I planned what I thought was going to be the happiest day of my life." More gasps, more shocked murmurs. I could see people turning to stare at Wesley and Zara, who were both looking like they wanted to disappear. "I want you all to know that I'm not telling you this for sympathy or to embarrass anyone." I said, though that last part wasn't entirely true. "I'm telling you because you deserve to know why you're not witnessing a wedding today. You took time out of your lives to be here, and you deserve the truth." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to say. "But I also want you to know something else. This isn't the end of my story. This is just the end of one chapter. A chapter that, frankly, I'm glad to be closing." I turned to look directly at Wesley and Zara. "You see, I've realized something today. I've realized that I don't want to marry someone who could lie to my face for months. I don't want to build a life with someone who could bullshit it with my best friend and then show up to our wedding like nothing happened. I don't want to be tied to someone who has so little respect for me that he would humiliate me in front of everyone I care about." My voice was getting stronger, more confident with each word. "And Zara," I continued, turning to my former best friend, "I've realized that I don't want someone in my life who could smile at me while stabbing me in the back. Someone who could help me plan my wedding while actively destroying it. Someone who could look me in the eye and lie so easily." The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice ringing out clear and strong. "You're all invited to stay for the reception. The food is paid for. The band is here. And frankly, I could use a party right about now. We're going to celebrate the fact that I dodged the biggest bullet of my life." A few people actually laughed at that, and I felt a surge of something that might have been joy. "But Wesley and Zara, you're not invited. In fact, I never want to see either of you again. You've shown me exactly who you are, and I believe you. I turned back to the crowd. I want to thank you all for being here today. Not for the wedding that didn't happen, but for witnessing the moment I chose myself over people who didn't deserve me. For witnessing the moment I decided that my happiness doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or love. I paused, looking out at all those faces. Some were crying, some were smiling, some were still in shock. But they were all looking at me with something that looked like respect. And to anyone else who might be in a situation like mine someday, remember this: you deserve better than someone who makes you question your worth. You deserve better than someone who lies to you. You deserve better than someone who would rather hurt you than be honest with you. I took a step back from the microphone, then forward again. Oh, and one more thing, I said, looking directly at Wesley. The ring. I slipped the engagement ring off my finger, the ring he had saved 8 months to buy. The ring I'd admired every day for a year and held it up so everyone could see it. This belongs to you, I said, but I'm not giving it back. I turned and threw the ring as hard as I could toward the pond at the edge of the property. It arced through the air, catching the sunlight for just a moment before disappearing into the water with a small splash. The crowd erupted. Some people cheered, some gasped, some actually applauded. I heard someone in the back yell, "You go, girl." And despite everything, I smiled. Wesley stepped forward, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "Harper, you can't just, I can," I said simply, and I did. He looked around at all the faces staring at him, at the mixture of disgust and disappointment in people's eyes. His own family was looking at him like they didn't recognize him. "This is insane," he said desperately. "You're being completely irrational. We can work this out." "No," I said firmly. "We can't. And you know what? I don't want to." I turned to Zara, who was crying openly now. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear. "I hope whatever you thought you were getting was worth losing the person who loved you most in this world." Zara's face crumpled completely. "Harper, please. You don't understand. I never meant for this to happen. I love you like a sister." "Sisters don't do this to each other," I said, cutting her off. "Sisters don't smile to your face while destroying your life behind your back. You made your choice. Zara, now live with it." I turned back to the crowd, feeling lighter than I had in hours, maybe lighter than I had in months. "Now," I said, my voice carrying a note of genuine happiness for the first time all day. "Who wants to party?" What happened next was something I never could have predicted. The crowd didn't disperse. They didn't awkwardly shuffle away, embarrassed by the spectacle they'd witnessed. Instead, they rallied around me in a way that took my breath away. My cousin Emma was the first to move. She marched up to the front, grabbed the microphone, and announced, "You heard the bride. This is now officially the best dodged a bullet party in Millbrook history." The band, who had been standing awkwardly to the side during my speech, suddenly launched into "I Will Survive." The irony wasn't lost on anyone, and the crowd actually started laughing and cheering. Wesley and Zara tried to leave quietly, but they had to walk through the crowd to get to the parking lot. Most people simply turned their backs, but not everyone was so gracious. "How could you?" I heard Mrs. Donovan, my mother's oldest friend, say to Zara as she passed. "That girl loved you like a sister." "You're a disgrace," someone else called out to Wesley. But there were others, Wesley's college friends, a few distant relatives who gave him sympathetic looks or whispered that maybe there was more to the story. It hurt to see that not everyone was on my side, that some people might actually think I'd overreacted. Mrs. Reed stopped in front of me before following her son. Her eyes were red from crying, and she looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Harper," she said quietly, "I am so sorry. I raised him better than this. I thought I raised him better than this." "You did," I said gently. "This isn't your fault. Mrs. Reed, you're a wonderful woman, and you raised Kira to be amazing. Sometimes people just choose to be less than they could be." She hugged me. this woman who was supposed to become my mother-in-law, and whispered, "You're going to be just fine, sweetheart. Better than fine." Kira lingered after her parents left. Wesley's sister had always been more like a friend to me than a future sister-in-law, and the pain in her eyes was almost as hard to bear as everything else. "I had no idea," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Harper, I swear to you, I had no idea this was happening." "I know us," I said, hugging her tightly. "I know you didn't. I'm so ashamed of him," she whispered. "I don't even know who he is anymore." "He's still your brother," I said. "That doesn't change, but you don't have to defend what he did." "I would never," she said fiercely. "Never. What he did was unforgivable." As the afternoon wore on, something magical happened. What should have been the worst day of my life was turning into something else entirely. The reception that was supposed to celebrate my marriage became a celebration of my freedom, my strength, my refusal to accept less than I deserved. People shared stories about their own close calls, their own moments of dodging bullets. My uncle told everyone about the time he almost married a woman who turned out to be already married to someone else. My coworker shared how she discovered her ex-fiancé was stealing money from her savings account. "To Harper," someone shouted, raising a glass of champagne, "for showing us all what real strength looks like." The toast was taken up by the entire crowd. To Harper, I found myself laughing, actually laughing for the first time in hours, surrounded by people who loved me, people who supported me, people who saw my worth even when I was struggling to see it myself. Elara Rose appeared at my side as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "How are you holding up, child?" she asked. "Better than I expected," I said honestly. "I thought I'd be devastated. I thought I'd be broken. And instead of didn't." I considered the question, looking around at the party that had spontaneously erupted around me. "Instead, I feel free. Like I've been holding my breath for months and can finally exhale." She nodded knowingly. "That's because you were settling, sweetheart. You were accepting less than you deserved because you thought it was the best you could get." Was it that obvious? To someone who's been watching people for 82 years, yes. She patted my arm gently. "You're a kind soul, Harper. Too kind sometimes. You see the best in people even when they're showing you their worst. That's a beautiful quality, but it can also be dangerous." "So what do I do now?" I asked. "You live," she said simply. "You live your life for yourself, not for anyone else's expectations. You figure out what makes you happy, what makes you feel alive, what makes you proud to be who you are, and you never ever settle for less than you deserve again." The next morning, I woke up in my childhood bedroom with a pounding headache and the vague sense that something terrible had happened. Then it all came rushing back: Wesley and Zara in that hotel room, the confrontation, my public declaration at the wedding venue, the impromptu party that followed. My throat tightened, and for a moment, I thought I might start crying and never stop. But I didn't. Instead, I got up, washed my face, and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. "You're still here," I whispered to my reflection. "You're still you." Downstairs, my family was tiptoeing around like someone had died. Mom was stress baking again, the kitchen counters covered with muffins and cookies. Dad was obsessively checking the news on his tablet, though I knew he wasn't really reading it. Thayer was the only one acting halfway normal, sprawled on the couch playing video games. "Morning, warrior princess," he said when he saw me, pausing his game. "How you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck," I admitted, sinking down next to him. "But I'll live." "Course you will," he said with absolute certainty. "You're the strongest person I know." "Harper." "Honey," Mom exclaimed, rushing in from the kitchen. "You're up. I made your favorite blueberry muffins. And I can make eggs, or pancakes, or—" "Muffins are fine, Mom," I said, managing a small smile. "Thank you." "People have been calling all morning," Dad said, setting down his tablet. asking about you, offering support. Even old Mr. Richardson from next door came by with flowers. I nodded, not sure what to say. The support was touching, but it also made everything so public. Everyone in Millbrook would be talking about what happened. I would be the subject of gossip for months, maybe years. Poor Harper Thorne, left at the altar by her cheating fiancé and backstabbing best friend. The thought made me feel sick. I think I need to get out of town for a while, I said suddenly. Mom's face fell. But where would you go? I don't know. Anywhere. I can't face everyone right now. I can't be the town tragedy. You're not a tragedy, Dad said firmly. You're a hero to a lot of people after yesterday. The way you handled yourself. Please, I cut him off. I know you're trying to help, but I just can't be here right now. My phone buzzed with a text. I looked down, expecting another message of sympathy from a well-meaning friend. Instead, I saw Wesley's name. We need to talk. Please, give me a chance to explain. I stared at the screen, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. Before I could decide whether to respond, another text came through. I'm outside your parents' house. Please, just 5 minutes. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. What is it? Thayer asked, leaning over to see my phone. When he saw the text, his face darkened. That asshole has some nerve. I stood up, my decision made. I need to do this. I need to hear what he has to say. Harper, no, Mom protested. After what he did, I know what he did. I said, but I need closure. I need to hear him say it to my face. Not in a hotel room with everyone watching. Dad looked like he wanted to argue, but instead, he just nodded. We'll be right here if you need us. I walked outside, my heart pounding. Wesley was sitting in his car, parked across the street. When he saw me, he got out quickly, looking disheveled and exhausted. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday, and his hair was a mess, like he'd been running his hands through it all night. Harper, he said, taking a step toward me. Stay right there, I said, holding up a hand. Say what you came to say, but don't come any closer. He stopped, nodding. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. Harper, I am so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I know that, but you have to believe me. It wasn't planned. It just happened. Things like that don't just happen, Wesley, I said, crossing my arms. You made choices, both of you, over and over again. I know, he said, running a hand through his hair. I know, but it started so innocently. Zara was helping with the wedding, and we were spending a lot of time together. I was stressed about the construction company, about living up to my dad's expectations. She listened, you know. And then one night we had too much to drink and... Stop, I said, feeling sick again. I don't need the details. Right, sorry. He took a deep breath. The point is, it was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life, and I know I can't undo it. But I want you to know that I do love you. I always have. I stared at him. This man I'd thought I would spend my life with and felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, just a profound emptiness. If you loved me, I said quietly, you wouldn't have done this. Love is a choice, Wesley. It's choosing someone every day, even when it's hard, even when you're tempted to do something else. I know that now, he said desperately, and I'm choosing you. I want to make this right. We can postpone the wedding, go to counseling, start over. No, I said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. No, we can't, because I'm choosing myself. I deserve better than someone who would betray me the way you did. I deserve better than having to wonder, every time you're late coming home, if you're with someone else. I deserve better than spending my life trying to trust someone who's proven they can't be trusted. Harper, please. I'm done, Wesley. We're done. I need you to leave now. His face crumpled. And for a moment, I saw genuine pain there. But was he hurting because he'd lost me? Or because he'd been caught, because he'd been publicly humiliated? I realized I would never know. And more importantly, I didn't care. "I'm going to get my things from the apartment," I said. "I'll let you know when, so you can make sure you're not there." He nodded miserably. "What? What are you going to do now?" The question caught me off guard. What was I going to do? I had no idea. My entire future had been wrapped up in our life together, in our plans. Now I had to start over. "I'm going to live," I said finally, echoing Allura Rose's words. "I'm going to figure out what makes me happy." As I watched him drive away, I felt a strange sense of closure. Not because our conversation had fixed anything it hadn't, but because I'd faced him on my terms, said what I needed to say, and walked away intact. I was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I moved in with my parents temporarily, sleeping in my childhood bedroom and trying to figure out what came next. I took a leave of absence from my teaching job, unable to face the sympathetic looks and whispered conversations that would inevitably follow me into the classroom. I spent a lot of time crying in the shower, in my bed at night, in the car when a song came on that reminded me of Wesley or Zara. The loss felt physical, like someone had carved out a piece of me, but I also spent time remembering, reevaluating our relationship through this new, terrible lens. Had there been signs? Had I ignored red flags because I was so committed to the fairy tale? There had been moments, looking back, times when Wesley had been distant, secretive about his phone, weekends away that he'd been vague about, the way he and Zara sometimes exchanged looks when they thought I wasn't watching. How had I missed it? How had I been so blind? "Because you trusted them," Allura Rose said when I visited her at her hotel before she flew back to Florida. "And that's not a flaw, Harper. That's a virtue. The world needs more people who expect the best from others, not fewer." "But I feel so stupid," I admitted. "Like everyone must have known but me." "No one knew," Shah said firmly. "I watched them together, at family gatherings, at the rehearsal dinner. They were careful. They were good liars. That's on them, not you." I nodded, trying to believe her. "I still don't know what to do next. I had this whole life planned out, and now you get to plan a new one," she said. "One that's truly yours, not one that's tied to someone else's expectations. It's terrifying, but it's also freedom." Allura Rose left the next day, but her words stayed with me. A new life, a fresh start. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. A week after the wedding, that wasn't. I went back to the apartment Wesley and I had shared to pack my things. Thayer came with me, insisting I shouldn't have to do it alone. The apartment felt foreign, like I was walking through a museum display of someone else's life. The photos on the walls, the furniture we'd chosen together, the kitchen where we'd cooked meals and danced to silly songs on the radio, it all seemed to belong to different people, people who didn't exist anymore. "You want me to take these down?" Thayer asked, gesturing to the framed photos of Wesley and me. "No, leave them," I said. "They're his memories now. I'm taking mine with me." I worked methodically, packing my clothes, my books, the few pieces of furniture that had been mine before we moved in together. It was strange how a 4-year relationship could be reduced to a few boxes, a suitcase, some IKEA bookshelves. As I was going through the closet, I found a small box pushed once to the back. Inside were all the cards and letters Zara had ever written me, going back to middle school, birthday cards, Christmas cards, notes passed in class, a physical record of our friendship. I sat on the floor, reading through them, tears streaming down my face. The love in these notes was real. I could feel it. So what had happened? How had she gone from the person who wrote, "You're my sister in every way that matters," to the woman who could betray me so completely? "Want me to throw those out?" Thayer asked, finding me surrounded by the cards. I shook my head. "Not yet. I need to understand. Some things can't be understood, Harper," he said gently. Some people are just broken in ways we can't fix. Maybe he was right. Maybe there was no explanation that would ever make sense to me, but I needed to try. When we'd finished packing, I stood in the doorway, looking back at the apartment one last time. So many memories, good and bad, so many dreams that would never come true. "You okay?" Thayer asked, carrying the last box to the car. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." As we drove away, I didn't look back. Whatever was next for me, it wasn't in that apartment, with those people in that life. It was somewhere else, waiting to be discovered. 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a call from Principal Martinez at Millbrook Elementary. "Harper, we miss you," she said. "The kids miss you. When are you coming back?" I hesitated. The thought of facing everyone, parents, colleagues, students, made my stomach churn. But I also missed my classroom, my students. The sense of purpose teaching gave me. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm not sure I can handle the attention." "People will talk," she said frankly. "That's what people do. But they'll move on to the next scandal soon enough. And in the meantime, there are 25 5-year-olds who need their teacher. Who need you?" She was right. Hiding away wasn't helping anyone, least of all me. And if I was going to build a new life, I needed to start somewhere. "Okay, I said. "I'll come back Monday." Returning to school was both harder and easier than I expected. Harder because I could feel the stares, hear the whispers that stopped when I entered the staff room. Easier because my students didn't care about my personal drama. They were just happy to have their teacher back. Miss Thorne," little Lily called out when I walked into the classroom. "We missed you so much, Wada." Peterson was nice, but she didn't do the voices for story time like you do. And just like that, I was back in the world of kindergarten, of finger painting and alphabet songs and tying shoelaces. It was exactly what I needed, a place where I was valued for who I was, not pitied for what had happened to me. The parents were trickier. Some avoided eye contact at pickup, clearly uncomfortable. Others were almost too sympathetic, pulling me aside to say how sorry they were, how terrible Wesley and Zara were, how I deserved better. Mrs. Larson, Lily's mom, was the worst, cornering me after school one day to tell me all about her cousin who had been left at the altar and was now living her best life as a yoga instructor in Bali. "It was a blessing in disguise," she insisted, clutching my arm. "Just like this will be for you." I smiled tightly, extracting myself as politely as I could. I was beginning to understand that my story wasn't just mine anymore. It had become public property, a cautionary tale, an inspiration, whatever people needed it to be. That weekend, I finally decided it was time to find my own place. I couldn't live with my parents forever, and I needed space to figure out who I was now. Post-Wesley, post-wedding, post-everything. I found a small one-bedroom apartment downtown, above the bookstore where I'd spent countless hours as a teenager. It was nothing fancy: exposed brick walls, creaky hardwood floors, a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. All mine. The day I signed the lease, I felt a surge of something I hadn't experienced in weeks: excitement. This apartment represented a fresh start, a blank canvas. I could decorate it however I wanted, stay up as late as I wanted, leave dishes in the sink if I wanted. Small freedoms, but they felt monumental. As I was picking up my keys from the landlord, I literally ran into someone coming out of the bookstore, sending the books in his arms, clattering to the sidewalk. "I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, bending down to help pick them up. I wasn't watching where I was going. "No worries," he said with a laugh. Neither was I, too busy trying to read and walk at the same time. I looked up and found myself face to face with a guy about my age, with dark curly hair and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was cute in an unassuming way, dressed in jeans and a faded t-shirt with the logo of a band I liked. "Successful multitasking is overrated anyway," I said, handing him back his books, a mix of literary fiction and what looked like a cookbook. "Tell that to my boss," he said with a grin. "She thinks I should be able to make lattes, take orders, and discuss 19th century Russian literature all at the same time." "You work at the coffee shop?" I asked, gesturing to Millbrook Beans across the street. "Guilty as charged. Griffin Hayes, coffee slinger and aspiring chef." He shifted his books to offer me his hand. "Harper Thorne," I said, shaking it. "New tenant and kindergarten teacher." His eyes widened slightly at my name, and I tensed, waiting for the awkward moment of recognition. Everyone in town knew who I was now, but all he said was, "Ah, so you're the one moving in upstairs. Welcome to the neighborhood. If you need a caffeine fix or recommendations for takeout that won't poison you, I'm your guy." I relaxed, grateful for the normal interaction. "I might take you up on that. I'm moving in this weekend." "Well, stop by the shop when you do," he said. "First coffee's on the house neighborhood tradition." I smiled, a genuine smile that felt almost foreign on my face. "I will. Thanks." As he walked away, I realized I just had my first normal conversation with someone new since the wedding disaster. Someone who hadn't looked at me with pity or curiosity or awkward discomfort. It felt good in my head. Maybe this was the first tiny step toward whatever came next. Moving day arrived, and with it, a new kind of anxiety. This wasn't just about changing apartments, it was about starting over, creating a life that was mine alone. My family helped. Of course, Dad and Thayer hauled furniture. Mom arranged my kitchen with the precision of a military general. And even my cousin Emma showed up with houseplants to add life to the place. By evening, the apartment was taking shape. It wasn't fully decorated yet, but it had the basics: my bed, a couch, a small dining table, bookshelves filled with my favorite novels. It felt like a blank page, waiting for me to write a new story. After everyone left, I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to the quiet. No one else is breathing. No one else's schedule to consider. No one else's preferences to accommodate. Just me. The silence was both liberating and terrifying. I remembered Griffin's invitation and decided I needed to get out of my head. Grabbing my keys, I headed across the street to Millbrook Beans. The coffee shop was cozy and warm, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. Griffin was behind the counter, focused on creating an elaborate design in the foam of a latte. He looked up as the bell over the door jingled, and his face broke into a smile when he saw me. "The new neighbor," he exclaimed. "How's moving day going?" "It's going," I said, approaching the counter. "The basics are in, but I have approximately 10,000 boxes to unpack." "Moving is the worst," he agreed, "but it's also kind of exciting, right? Like new space, new possibilities." "Exactly," I said, surprised by his insight. "That's exactly how it feels. So, what can I get for you? Remember, first one's on the house." "In that case, I'll take the most expensive thing on the menu," I joked. "Ah, a woman after my own heart," he laughed. "How about our specialty, a salted caramel mocha with house-made caramel sauce that will change your life?" "Sold," I said. Life-changing sounds perfect right about now. As he worked on my drink, I looked around the shop. It was quiet at this hour, just a couple of college students with laptops in the corner and an elderly man reading a newspaper by the window. "Here you go," Griffin said, sliding a large mug across the counter. "One life-changing mocha. I should warn you, though I can't be held responsible for any major decisions you make after drinking this." I laughed, taking the mug. "I'll sign a waiver." "So, kindergarten teacher, huh?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "That must be chaotic." "In the best possible way," I said. 5-year-olds are basically tiny drunk people with no filter and boundless energy. It's exhausting, but it's never boring. I bet, my nephew is 5, and every time I see him, I feel like I've run a marathon by the end of the day. Exactly. But they're also at this amazing age where everything is still magical to them. Their enthusiasm for the smallest things is contagious. Sounds like a good antidote to cynicism, he said. It is. I agreed, Ubis. Even on my worst days, it's hard to stay sad when someone brings you a crumpled dandelion like it's the most precious gift in the world. I took a sip of the mocha and my eyes widened. Okay, you weren't kidding. This is incredible. Told you, he grinned. Life-changing, right? I might have to move back out if I become addicted to these. My budget can't handle it. I'll give you the neighbor discount, he promised. Can't have you leaving just when you got here. There was something so easy about talking to Griffin. He didn't seem to be wondering about my story, didn't seem to be waiting for me to mention the wedding disaster. He was just present, genuine. I stayed for nearly an hour, sipping my mocha and chatting about nothing important, favorite books, worst movies, the proper way to organize a spice rack alphabetically, according to Griffin, who was very passionate about his cooking. When I finally headed back to my apartment, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The conversation hadn't erased what had happened, hadn't magically healed all my wounds, but it had reminded me that there was still a world out there, a world of normal interactions and simple pleasures and new people to meet. As I tackled my boxes that night, I found myself smiling for no particular reason. Maybe Alara Rose was right. Maybe this fresh start, as painful as it was, could also be a kind of freedom. The next morning, I woke to a text from Zara. I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to, but I need to talk to you. Please, I need to explain. I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tight with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to delete it and pretend I'd never seen it. Part of me wanted to respond with all the anger and hurt I'd been carrying, and a small, quiet part of me wanted answers to the questions that had been haunting me. Why, how could you? Was any of it real? After several minutes of internal debate, I typed out a response, not ready to talk yet. Maybe someday, but not now. It was the truth, Mobam. I wasn't ready to hear whatever explanation she had to offer. I wasn't ready to face her or forgive her or understand her. I needed more time to heal, to build this new life, to figure out who I was without her or Wesley. But not now wasn't the same as never. And that realization surprised me. Maybe someday I would be strong enough to hear her out, to seek understanding if not reconciliation. Maybe someday, but not today. Today was for unpacking boxes, for hanging pictures on walls, for making this new space my own. Today was for moving forward, one small step at a time. As I put away the last of my clothes, I found the box of cards and letters from Zara that I'd taken from the old apartment. I'd been avoiding it, not ready to face those memories, but now sitting on the floor of my new bedroom. I opened the box and began to read through them again. This time, I wasn't looking for answers or explanations. I was saying goodbye to a friendship that had shaped so much of my life. Each card, each letter, was a piece of our shared history, birthday celebrations, school achievements, inside jokes, hard times we'd weathered together. They were real, these moments. The betrayal didn't erase them, but it changed how I would remember them forever. When I reached the bottom of the box, I found a small, handmade card Zara had given me on my 16th birthday. Inside, in her perfect handwriting, was a quote. Some people come into our lives and quickly go. Some stay for a while, leave footprints on our hearts, and we are never, ever the same. Tears filled my eyes as I read the words. How prophetic they seemed now, though not in the way either of us could have imagined back then. Zara had left footprints on my heart, for better and for worse, and I was indeed forever changed by loving her, by trusting her, by losing her in the worst possible way. But maybe being changed wasn't only a tragedy. Maybe it was also an opportunity. I closed the box and placed it on the highest shelf in my closet, not thrown away, but not center stage in my life anymore either. A part of my past that I wasn't quite ready to discard, but that no longer defined my present or my future. Outside my window, Millbrook was waking up, people heading to work, to school, to their daily routines. Life continuing, as it always did. And for the first time since that terrible day, I felt ready to join them to step back into the world not as half of a couple, not as a victim of betrayal, but as simply Harper, teacher, daughter, sister, friend, a woman finding her way back to herself, one day at a time. 3 months after the wedding, that wasn't. I stood in my classroom watching my students perform their fall pageant. They were dressed as various woodland creatures, singing a song about hibernation that we'd practiced for weeks. Little Jeremy, playing a particularly enthusiastic squirrel, was bouncing so high during the chorus that his tail kept falling off. I bit my lip to keep from laughing, catching the eye of Mrs. Martinez in the audience. She winked at me, and I felt a surge of gratitude for this woman who had encouraged me to come back to work when hiding seemed so much easier. After the performance, parents crowded around, congratulating the children and thanking me for my work. It was still strange sometimes, interacting with people who knew my story, who had heard about the wedding disaster. But it was getting easier. The whispers had largely stopped, replaced by normal conversations about homework and field trips and whether the cafeteria food was actually edible. "Miss Thorne, did you see me?" Lily asked, tugging on my skirt. I didn't forget any of my lines. "You were perfect," I assured her, bending down to her level. "The best fox I've ever seen." Her mother approached, smiling. "Truly adorable, all of them. You have such a way with the children, Harper." "Thank you, Mrs. Larson," I said, waiting for the inevitable awkward comment about my personal life. But it didn't come. Instead, she simply said, "We're so grateful Lily has you as her teacher," before taking her daughter's hand and heading for the exit. Progress, I thought, small but real. As I cleaned up the classroom, I found myself humming the hibernation song, smiling at the memory of Jeremy's bouncing. Teaching had always brought me joy, but now it felt like more than that. It felt like purpose, like solid ground beneath my feet when everything else had shifted. My phone buzzed with a text from Griffin. "Heard your students crushed it tonight. Celebratory coffee." Over the past few months, Griffin and I had developed a friendship built on coffee shop conversations and book recommendations. He was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard, and he never pushed for more than I was ready to give. "Yes, please," I replied, "just finishing up here." 20 minutes later, I walked into Millbrook Beans to find Griffin behind the counter, experimenting with some new concoction. "There she is," he called out when he saw me. "The kindergarten impresario herself." "Impresario might be overselling it," I laughed, sliding onto a stool at the counter. Though I did manage to get 25 five-year-olds to stay on stage for an entire performance. So maybe I deserve a medal. "Better than a medal," he said, sliding a mug across to me. "I created this in your honor. I'm calling it the Kindergarten Triumph Chocolate. Espresso, and just a hint of caramel to represent the sweet reward of not losing any children during a school function." I took a sip and closed my eyes in appreciation. "This is amazing. You're wasted as a barista. You know, you should be running your own place." "That's the dream," he admitted. "Someday when I can afford more than ramen and thrift store furniture." "Well, you've got at least one loyal customer lined up," I promised. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that always made me feel like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "So, tell me about the pageant. Any theatrical disasters?" Jeremy's squirrel tail had a mind of its own, and Sophia decided halfway through that she'd rather be a butterfly than a bear. But otherwise, it was surprisingly disaster-free. As I recounted the pageant highlights, I realized how comfortable I felt with Griffin. There was none of the pressure I'd felt with Wesley, none of the need to be perfect or to anticipate his moods. With Griffin, I could just be myself, messy, uncertain, still figuring things out. "What?" he asked, catching me staring at him. "Nothing," I said quickly. "Just thanks for being a good friend these past few months. It's meant a lot." His expression softened. "Anytime, Harper. You're pretty easy to be friends with. There was something in his voice, something that made me wonder if friends was all he wanted to be. And to my surprise, I found myself wondering the same thing. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. I was still healing, still learning to trust my own judgment again after being so spectacularly wrong about Wesley and Zara, as if summoned by my thoughts. My phone buzzed with another text, this one from Zara. I know you said you're not ready to talk, and I respect that, but I'm leaving town next week for a job in Chicago. If you ever want to hear my side, this might be your last chance for a while. No pressure. I just miss you. I stared at the screen, my good mood evaporating. Zara was leaving. After all these months of ignoring her messages, I suddenly felt a strange panic at the thought of her moving away without any resolution between us. Bad news, Griffin asked, noticing my expression. Not exactly, I said, setting down my phone. Just complicated. Want to talk about it? I hesitated. I hadn't told Griffin the full story of what happened at the wedding. He knew the basics everyone in town did, but not the details. Not how it felt. My former best friend, I said finally. She wants to meet before she moves away. Ah, he said, understanding immediately. The maid of honor. Yeah. Are you going to see her? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants answers. Part of me never wants to see her face again. What does your gut tell you? I considered the question. My gut had been silent for a long time after the wedding, buried under layers of hurt and anger and confusion. But now, thinking about Zara leaving without ever understanding why she'd betrayed me, I felt a clear pull. That I need closure, I said slowly. That without it, she'll always have this power over me, this ability to make me question everything. Griffin nodded. Then I think you have your answer. What if I'm not strong enough? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. What if seeing her brings it all back, and I fall apart again? You won't, he said with absolute certainty. Harper, you're one of the strongest armed people I've ever met. You've rebuilt your entire life in 3 months. You've faced gossip and pity and public scrutiny without breaking. Meeting your ex-friend for coffee isn't going to undo all of that. His faith in me was both touching and terrifying. What if I couldn't live up to it? And if it gets too hard, he added gently, you can always walk away. You're in control here, not her. I was in control. The realization settled over me like a warm blanket. This wasn't the same as that terrible day in the hotel room when my world had been shattered without warning. This time, I was choosing to face Zara on my terms, with my eyes wide open. Thanks, I said, reaching across the counter to squeeze his hand. For the coffee and the perspective. Any time, he said, squeezing back. That's what friends are for. Friends. The word felt both right and not quite enough. But for now, it was what we were, and I was grateful for it. That night, I texted Zara back tomorrow, 2 p.m., Parker's Diner. I'll give you 30 minutes. Her response was immediate. I'll be there, thank you. Harper. As I set my phone down, I felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. Tomorrow, I would face the woman who had been my best friend for most of my life, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what she had to say, but I was sure that I needed to hear it if I ever wanted to truly move on. Parker's Diner was neutral territory, not a place Zara and I had frequented together, not somewhere with loaded memories. I arrived early, choosing a booth in the back where we wouldn't be too visible to curious onlookers. My hands were shaking slightly as I ordered a coffee, and I took deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. I could do this. 30 minutes, and then I could walk away. Never look back if that's what I chose. I saw her before she saw me. Zara Collins, my best friend since 2nd grade, the person who had known all my secrets, my fears, my dreams. She looked different somehow, smaller, less confident. Her hair was shorter, and she was dressed more conservatively than I remembered, in a simple blouse and jeans. When she spotted me, her step faltered, as if she hadn't quite believed I would actually be here. She approached cautiously, like I might flee if she moved too quickly. "Harper," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for coming." "Sit down," I said, gesturing to the seat across from me. "You said you wanted to talk. So talk." She slid into the booth, her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "I don't even know where to start." "The beginning would be good," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "When did it start with Wesley?" She flinched at his name but nodded. "About 6 months before the wedding. You were working late on that special project for your class, and Wesley asked me to help him pick out your birthday present. We went shopping, had a few drinks afterward, and—" She trailed off, her eyes downcast. "And you slept together." I finished for her. "Yes," she whispered. "It was supposed to be a one-time mistake. We both felt terrible the next day. We agreed it would never happen again." "But it did." "It did," she acknowledged. "At first, we really tried to stay away from each other. But then when we were together, with you, there was this tension, this secret between us. And somehow, that made it more intense when we gave in again." I felt sick, imagining the three of us together, me, oblivious, while they exchanged meaningful glances, shared a secret I knew nothing about. "Why?" I asked, the question that had haunted me for months. "Why him? Why would you do that to me?" She was quiet for a long moment, as if gathering her courage. "Because I was jealous," she finally said. "Because you had everything I wanted. You were so sure of yourself, so confident in your relationship, so happy, and I felt like I was falling behind, like everyone was moving forward except me. That's not a reason to sleep with my fiancé," I said, anger flaring. "That's not a reason to betray someone who loved you like a sister." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I know that. There's no excuse for what I did. But you asked why, and that's the truth. I was jealous and insecure and broken, and when Wesley started paying attention to me, started confiding in me about his doubts, the words hit me like a slap. "What doubts?" She looked up, surprise crossing her face. "He didn't tell you, during those last few months, he was having second thoughts about the wedding. He told me he wasn't sure he was ready, that he felt trapped." I sat back, trying to process this new information. Wesley had doubts he'd felt trapped while I was planning our wedding, picking out china patterns and writing vows. He'd been questioning our entire relationship. And instead of telling him to talk to me, I said slowly, "Instead of being a good friend, you what encouraged his doubts." "I didn't mean to," she said, but her eyes slid away from mine. I listened. And maybe I made him feel like his feelings were valid, like maybe he was settling too. Settling, the word felt like acid on my tongue. He was settling for me. "No, that's not what I meant," she said quickly. "God, I'm messing this up so badly. I just, I let him talk to me instead of you. I let him lean on me in a way that crossed all these lines. And then one thing led to another. And suddenly we were in this thing that neither of us knew how to stop." "You could have stopped it any time," I pointed out. "You could have not shown up at his hotel room on our wedding day." She flinched again. "That was, there's no excuse for that day. We'd actually ended things a few weeks before the wedding. I told him it had to stop, that we were destroying you, destroying ourselves. But then he texted me that morning, saying he needed to see me, that he was freaking out about the wedding." "So you went?" I said flatly. "I went," she confirmed. "I told myself I was just going to talk him through his nerves, remind him how much he loved you. But when I got there, he had champagne open, and he started saying all these things about how he'd made a mistake ending things with me, how he couldn't stop thinking about me." She shook her head, disgust crossing her face. And I let myself believe it. I wanted to believe I was special, that he wanted me more than you. So I drank too much champagne and made the worst mistake of my life. I sat there, absorbing her words, trying to reconcile them with the narrative I'd built in my head. I'd imagined their betrayal as some grand passion, some irresistible attraction that had overridden all logic and loyalty. But this sounded tawdry and sad. Two insecure people seeking validation in the worst possible way. "Are you still together?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "No," she said quickly. "No, It fell apart pretty quickly after the wedding. Turns out when you build a relationship on betraying someone else, it doesn't have a very solid foundation." There was a bitter irony there that might have made me laugh under different circumstances. "I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness," she continued. "I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I know what I did was unforgivable. And I wanted you to know that it wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me being broken and him being a coward." I sat with that for a moment, processing. "Why Chicago?" I asked finally. She seemed surprised by the question. "My aunt lives there. She helped me get a job at her marketing firm. I need a fresh start, away from all the whispers and stares, away from the constant reminder of what I did to you." "Running away," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Maybe," she acknowledged. "Or maybe just trying to become someone better, someone who wouldn't do what I did." I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hold on to the hurt and betrayal that had defined so much of the past 3 months. But sitting across from Zara now, seeing the genuine remorse in her eyes, the self-loathing that mirrored my own darkest moments, I felt something unexpected pity. Not forgiveness, I wasn't there yet. Might never be there. But pity for the woman who had been so broken, so desperate for validation that she'd destroyed the most important relationship in her life. "I hope you find what you're looking for in Chicago," I said finally. "I hope you become that better person." "Thank you," she whispered, tears falling freely now. "Harper, I know I have no right to ask, but do you think you could ever forgive me? Not now, but someday?" I considered the question carefully. Could I forgive her? Could I ever look at her without seeing her tangled with Wesley in that hotel bed? "I don't know," I said honestly. "Right now, I can't imagine it, but I've learned not to say never about anything." She nodded, wiping her tears. "That's more than I deserve." "Probably, Boem," I agreed, but without malice. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history hanging between us, all the good memories, all the love, and now this terrible wound that might never fully heal. "I should go," she said finally, gathering her purse. "Thank you for listening. Harper, it means more than I can say." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She stood, hesitating for a moment as if wanting to say more, to do more, hug me, perhaps, or make some gesture to bridge the vast gulf between us. But in the end, she simply turned and walked away. I watched her go, this woman who had been such a central part of my life for so long. There was an ache in my chest, a sense of loss that felt both old and new. But there was something else too, a lightness, a release. I had faced her. I had heard her out. And while her explanation hadn't magically healed everything, it had answered questions that had been haunting me for months. Wesley had had doubts. He'd felt trapped. The fairy tale I thought we were living had been just that, a fantasy, at least toward the end. As painful as that knowledge was, it was also freeing. I hadn't been crazy to miss the signs. They had been deliberately hidden from me by the two people I trusted most. That didn't absolve them of their betrayal, but it helped me understand how I had been so blindsided, so completely unprepared for what happened. As I paid for my coffee and left the diner, I felt like I'd put down a weight I'd been carrying for months, not all of it. Not yet, but enough to stand a little straighter, to breathe a little easier. Closure, I realized, didn't mean erasing the hurt or forgetting what happened. It meant understanding it enough to start letting it go. The year after my wedding that was full of unexpected moments, some painful, some healing, some simply surprising. Wesley left town a few months after Zara, unable to rebuild his reputation at his father's company or in the community that had largely sided with me. I heard through Kira that he'd moved to Seattle, started over with a different construction firm. She kept in touch with him, which I understood he was still her brother, despite his terrible choices. He asks about you sometimes. She told me when we met for coffee one day. Wanted to know if you're okay. I'm getting there, I said, and meant it. My relationship with Griffin evolved slowly, cautiously. We went from coffee shop conversations to actual dates, dinner at the Italian place downtown, a movie at the old theater on Main Street, a day trip to the lake when summer came around again. He was patient, never pushing for more than I was ready to give, always respectful of the boundaries I set. And gradually, those boundaries expanded as I learned to trust again, not blindly, not completely, but enough to let someone new into my life. I'm not trying to replace what you lost, he told me one night as we walked back from dinner. I know that's not possible. I just want to build something new with you, something that's ours. I'd like that, I said, taking his hand for the first time. Teaching continued to be my anchor, my purpose. Principal Martinez recommended me to head up a new early childhood development initiative for the district, a significant promotion that would allow me to shape education policy at a broader level. You've really come into your own this year, she said when she gave me the news. Whatever happened in your personal life, it seems to have unlocked something in you professionally. She was right. The Harper who emerged from the ruins of her wedding day was different from the woman who had walked into that hotel room in her wedding dress. Stronger, more self-reliant, more willing to take risks and speak her mind. I even started volunteering at the local women's shelter, sharing my story with others who had experienced betrayal and loss. It was healing to transform my pain into something that might help someone else find their way back to themselves. You're not defined by what happened to you. I would tell them, you're defined by how you choose to move forward. Words I was still learning to live by myself. A year to the day after the wedding, I stood in my classroom watching my students, a new batch of 5-year-olds, perform their end-of-year celebration. They were singing about summer and sunshine, their small faces alight with excitement for the adventures ahead. As I watched them, I thought about all the ways my life had changed in 12 months. All the wisdom, all the growth, all the unexpected joy I had found in the wake of what I'd once thought was unbearable pain. After the performance, as parents collected their children and the room gradually emptied, I noticed Griffin standing in the doorway, waiting patiently. That was quite a show, he said, walking over to help me stack chairs. I particularly enjoyed the kid who kept doing robot moves during the butterfly song. That's Miles, I laughed. He's convinced every song is improved by robot dancing. Hard to argue with that logic, Griffin agreed. We worked side by side, comfortable in the rhythm we'd established over the past months. When the classroom was tidy, he offered me his hand. Ready for dinner? I made a reservation at that new place on Elm Street. Actually, Ossie, I said, a sudden idea taking hold. Can we make a detour first? There's somewhere I want to go. 20 minutes later, we stood at the edge of Riverside Manor, the venue where my wedding was supposed to have taken place a year ago. The gardens were in full bloom, just as they had been that day. The gazebo where I'd confronted Wesley and Zara still standing serene by the water. Are you sure you want to be here? Griffin asked, concern in his voice. I'm sure, wow, I said, walking toward the pond where I'd thrown my engagement ring. I need to see it again, to remind myself how far I've come. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, just as it had a year ago when Alara Rose had found me in the midst of chaos and offered the wisdom that had become my North Star. You live your life for yourself, not for anyone else's expectations. I stood at the edge of the pipe, looking out at the water where my ring lay somewhere in the mud, the symbol of promises broken, of trust betrayed, of a future that had crumbled before it could begin. A year ago, I said quietly, I thought my life was over. I thought losing Wesley and Zara meant losing everything. Griffin stood beside me, not touching me, but present, solid, real. And now, he asked, I turned to look at him, this man who had entered my life when I least expected it. who had been patient and kind and honest in all the ways that mattered. Now I realize I didn't lose anything that was really mine to keep, I said. I gained everything. I gained myself. He smiled, that warm smile that had become one of my favorite sights in the world. I like that self quite a bit, he said, taking my hand. Me too, I admitted. It took me a while to get here, but I like who I am now. I like the life I'm building. We stood there as the last light faded from the sky, hand in hand, watching as the first stars appeared. Tomorrow, I would call Mrs. Martinez and accept the promotion. Tomorrow, I would take another step toward the future I was creating. But tonight, I was content to stand here with someone who saw me clearly and loved what he saw, in the place where my old dreams had died and my new ones had, unexpectedly, begun to take root. My phone buzzed with a text from Alara Rose, who had become a regular correspondent since the wedding. Thinking of you today. Dear, saw your promotion announcement in the paper. So proud of you. You're blooming exactly as you should. I smiled, typing back, thank you for everything you taught me that day. Her response came quickly. You taught yourself, child. I just reminded you of what you already knew. As we walked back to the car, I thought about the woman in the wedding dress who had stood in that hotel room doorway. She had been so afraid of being alone, so convinced that her worth was tied to being chosen by someone else. Now I knew better. Now I knew that the most important choice wasn't being chosen. It was choosing yourself. What are you thinking about? Griffin asked softly. Just how different everything is now, I said. How different I am. Different how I considered the question. I used to think happiness was something that happened to you, something you had to wait for or earn or find in someone else. Now I know it's something you create for yourself. He squeezed my hand. I love that about you. Your strength, your independence, the way you know your own worth. It took me a while to learn it, I admitted. The best lessons usually do. Later that night, after Griffin had gone home and I was getting ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was confident, peaceful, genuinely happy. She bore little resemblance to the anxious bride who had woken up exactly 1 year ago. I thought about Wesley and Zahara, wondered briefly how they were doing, then realized I didn't really care. They were part of my past now, a chapter that had ended. They had no power over my present or my future. I thought about the women at the shelter where I volunteered, many of whom were just beginning their own journeys toward independence and self-worth. I thought about my students, who were learning every day that they were capable of more than they imagined. I thought about all the people who were still waiting for someone else to validate their worth, to make them feel complete. I wanted to tell them what I'd learned, that you are already complete. You're already enough. You don't need anyone else's permission to be happy, to be successful, to be proud of who you are. The best revenge isn't hurting the people who hurt you. The best revenge is building a life so beautiful, so fulfilling, so authentically yours that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. The best revenge is becoming so completely yourself that you can't imagine wanting to be anyone else. As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that had forced me to grow. Gratitude for the betrayal that had set me free. Gratitude for the strength I discovered in my darkest moment. And gratitude for the life I was living now. A life that was entirely my own, built on my own terms, filled with people who saw my worth and reflected it back to me. I fell asleep smiling, excited about tomorrow, about the promotion interview, about the future I was creating. One choice at a time. The woman who had needed someone else to complete her was gone. In her place was a woman who was already whole, already enough, already exactly who she was meant to be. And that woman was unstoppable.